Hello, beautiful people of Earth. We're here with a wonderful being. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Shane, what's up?
So Shane, share with us today what you're about and what your spirit's doing here.
What my spirit's doing here. Wow,
Yeah.
that's getting right into it. What I'm doing, I'm living in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
I run an organization called Public Records,
Right.
which is a space, a brand, and sort of a collection of people trying to do what they can to bring cool shit into the world. What my spirit is doing on this planet is an interesting question. I don't know if I have the answer to that. I don't know if I necessarily assign specific meaning to life or like place on earth, but I can say that what I feel called to do on a daily basis is just build stuff. I think building and creating is sort of, in a way, the holiest activity I could think about on earth. And we don't necessarily think what we're doing is so grand or profound by any means, and certainly isn't changing the world. But I guess I feel like, in whatever existence and framework we're embodying, we just kind of do the best we can to do things that we find value and joy, and hopefully other people find some meaning in as well.
Nice. And so what are some of these projects that you guys create, and what is Public Records?
So we started Public Records in 2017. I'm a graphic designer by background.
Right.
Perfect. Although, I mean, he was being thoughtful, right? He was wearing it, so
he is.
his tone could be a little different, but
Yeah.
let's assume he had good intentions.
Yes, he did have good intentions.
We started Public Records in 2017.
Nice.
What
What were you doing before that?
So I'm a graphic designer by trade. I went to design school,
Nice. Where?
Parsons.
Hey, nice.
And in my 20s, I was doing sort of consulting work for pretty large real estate and hotel projects at a pretty sort of like big institutional level. And when I turned 30, someone very close to me passed away suddenly.
Sorry to hear that.
And I sort of experienced through, I guess what you could call like a psychedelic experience that the reason for his death was basically being too consumed with money and chasing money and whatnot. So I sort of decided at that point in my life that it was time to like make a move and do something that felt a little bit more true to myself, and maybe wasn't the most like direct path to financial gain, but just was sort of resetting values. And so I dipped what I was doing. Around that time, I met my now partner, Francis, who is a musician, artist, DJ, engineer. We kind of hit it off and met at this really sort of interesting point in our lives where he had been a musician for a long time, and on the flip side, he was kind of ready to do something a bit more grounded, I guess. Although, nothing that we do is is super grounded, but in the context of being a musician, relatively, I guess it was. And anyway, we really hit it off and sort of saw eye to eye in a lot of things, and just like music and life and whatnot. And we decided, like, let's do something together. But we didn't like create this concept, Public Records. We weren't like shopping around a deck. It was just like, let's do a space, around music and design, things we care about, and hospitality, and try to create this sort of like, I don't know, community energy around these things that we care about. And it wasn't necessarily supposed to be so big. It wasn't necessarily supposed to be a brand. And sort of serendipitous around that time, another friend of mine found this crazy building in Gowanus. And the building had this wild history. It was built as the ASPCA headquarters.
Wow.
And then in the 80s, it had been acquired by these two music proprietors. One was a church pipe organ restoration company, and
Whoa. Church pipe organ.
yeah, crazy. One of the only ones left in the city. And the other one was a vintage stringed instrument restoration shop. Anyway.
Whoa. So all the vibrations were already there.
Totally, yeah, totally. So, so my friend brought us to the building. It's an incredible, just architectural relic on this really polarizing canal. It's a really interesting architectural condition and kind of environmental condition. And then the history of the building was just wow, this is crazy.
Yeah.
This idea of community service and music, it's exactly fits within this sort of conceptual framework that we have been trying to materialize.
Whoa.
And so we're yeah, let's go. And we dove into it, and it took us 2 years, and the building and its history kind of inspired the name Public Records. And the various kind of zones and kind of historical areas in this building inspire these different experiential uses, and that sort of became Public Records.
Whoa, nice.
Yeah, so that's the origin story.
Thanks. So I want to highlight some of your design practices and some of your design philosophies. Where do you get most of your inspiration from?
I try to avoid inspiration kind of in a way. I think, not to say that, I think the notion of a stroke of genius is absolutely false. So I think everything is an inspiration in a way.
Yeah.
But sort of formulaic inspiration, I don't know, Pinterest or looking at other people's work, to me can be really, really damaging.
Right.
So I try to stay away from that. And we look at things very much from sort of an experiential or a sensory level. So, we never really think or talk about themes or styles. We don't really believe in that.
Right.
Sort of ephemeral and sort of fleeting. We more so think about what are we trying to do with a space, and how are we trying to inspire people to behave and feel.
Right.
And then just start to kind of pencil stuff in from there.
So space comes first in your creative process? What is the creative process like?
So for Public Records, so we built Public Records, which was the cafe, the bar, and the sound room.
Right.
These are all kind of carved out of these sort of existing spaces. And then later we took on upstairs, which was actually where the guitar store was. And so these were all kind of reactions to existing spaces. Obviously sound played a big part in the first phase. The sound room was informed very much by acoustic considerations, how do you kind of establish what's going to create the most immersive and moving sonic condition, and how do you kind of design something that feels really refined and stripped back and within that. And then with the bar, it was how do you maintain this crazy historic envelope, but intervene different elements that are going to allow people to sit and drink and hang out with each other. And so it was all very humble. And I think a lot of the reception from the design community for those spaces was really the doing less and the restraint in it. And also that process of building it in those 2 years, I didn't, that was really the first project physical project that I ever designed. So it was a pretty circuitous, painstaking, grueling process. And I think that those sort of feelings in a weird way kind of embedded a sense of spirit into the space that really resonated with people. That's something we think and talk a lot about, is how do you create process around inserting a spirit into a place. And I think it's with intention and honing that process and the inputs. Right. So yeah, we talk about more things in that sort of level than what material we're using necessarily. And the materials are just wood, stone, metal, I don't know,
nice. Raw elements.
I think just whatever comes, whatever's available, whatever makes sense, whatever hopefully is going to do the least damage to the planet and people and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um,
I'd love to expand on that actually. So it seems like some of the design principles of public records is to be designing things that are sustainable and a bit just harmonious with the earth and nature. So
Yeah.
what are some of the philosophies around that too?
Well, building anything to be harmonious with nature is very challenging, especially when you're doing it in a sort of like a very DIY way. So like in the sense of public records, like the first phase, we used whatever material was available. Most of the materials in that space, like, were found at Home Depot. We were pretty
Nice.
DIY outfit at that point. And then, so to like continue and answer your question at the same time, so after we built upstairs, we had this vacant parking lot next to public records that we had sort of like had our eye on since we got into the building, which is this basically vacant asphalt lot that, like the inherent character was sort of, one, it was next to public records, but it also was sort of canopied by some pretty amazing trees that we have. So it was just asking to be re-envisioned. It was very challenging, just because like if you build new on a new space, it's essentially building a building, which comes with its own set of bureaucratic necessities and sort of like hurdles.
Yes.
So we spent a couple of years devising these different plans to try to do something there, and really that was our first opportunity to really build something from the ground up and to attempt to kind of like inject ecology back into a lifeless environment, which was very exciting to us. So the challenge set was kind of the most, I think, interesting to us and applicable to things that we're interested in. And we had gotten to a point in the organization where we were established, and I guess we had a little bit more of the ability to start thinking in these terms, as opposed to just like being a startup outfit that had to like get this crazy place open. You know what I mean?
Nice. So you guys built public records in 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
Wow, that's very impressive. Like it seems like it took longer to build it, and but I guess that's what creative minds can do in a short period of time, if the right minds come together. So I'm also curious about where you grew up, right? And like what influenced you to get into graphic design? Why graphic design out of all things?
I grew up in New Jersey, pretty like cultureless, suburban, strip mall type of environment. But I was like really good at drawing from a very young age.
Nice.
It like kind of defined me, for better or for worse. I think like I wasn't really surrounded by a lot of creative people, so like I was good, but if I grew up somewhere else, there'd been probably like a lot more people that were like can just help me like navigate that without making such a big deal out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was like a thing, and like in school, and I was taken out of class to go and like paint and draw, and I think it was like actually really damaging. Also, my father was a sign maker, so I grew up like using these like archaic programs like Corel Draw. I don't know if like no one would ever hear these stuff.
Corel Draw.
Printing the stuff on like a plotter and weeding vinyl. So like signs and symbols like were like deeply, and he worked at home. His workshop was in the basement.
So you saw him working?
Yeah, and I would work with him.
Dude,
and he was like,
sick.
It's funny. He was he wasn't doing crazy shit. He was like a commercial sign maker. So he was doing like the grocery store, and it was like Arial or Helvetica or brush script. It was like early internet fonts.
So you're already surrounded by the typography and fonts at an early age.
Totally, yeah.
Whoa.
And yeah, so that was kind of my childhood. I was kind of a punk
Nice.
in school. I think I just really wasn't creatively challenged at all in where I was, and that whole story. And then at the end of high school, I was just kind of like, all right, like how do I get to Manhattan? And I was like, I should go to art school. And so I just like kind of whipped up a portfolio and applied, and and got in.
Nice.
And then like at Parsons, it was just like, it was the first sort of, scholastic educational environment that it was like incredibly stimulating to me, and totally validated that like, I'm sure I was part of the problem in school, but like also the school was probably more of the problem. You know what I mean? And then and then after school, and then like later I didn't really practice. I moved to Manhattan, and I got involved in like nightlife and hospitality, just having a good time. And then I got involved in the hotel and real estate thing kind of from those relationships.
Right.
And then public records is really when I got back into both graphic design and then starting to design spaces and products and stuff like that.
I see. So what were you doing for these hotel and real estate developments? Were you doing their graphic design?
No, nothing like that. It was just like strategy, like
Whoa.
How do we think about the food and beverage, nightlife, entertainment? How is it existing within the property? What is that? How do we implement that? Strategy, stuff like that.
I see. Nice.
Yeah, I wasn't picking up the pen and drawing or designing anything really. I mean, I was like overseeing designers and whatnot and choosing designers, but it's weird how things work out, because I think that whole period, like if I had just started to pursue graphic design or whatever and worked at some agency, probably would have been a different road. I think like coming at industries with different, like the understanding of how to navigate like the built environment, I think was instrumental in being able to actualize public records, as opposed to if I had been like a career graphic designer or even interior designer or whatever.
Oh, nice. Well, thanks. So now I'm curious about some of your ways of finding mindfulness. I'm sure you have a few ways to find mindfulness in your life. What are some of those ways?
I have a son now who's 3 years old. That kind of changes the game big time.
How does it change the game?
It just makes it makes it that much harder to like prioritize yourself,
right,
and your mind and body. But on the flip side of it, like it could also be like an incredible inspiration, because you see yourself through like this other mirror, which is like obviously the most profound mirror you could ever imagine your child. You know what I mean? So for me, a lot of it is like just remembering that like this is all kind of exists in your body, and like your mind will never actually, it's kind of deceiving because like mindfulness speaks to mind, but like for me at least, it's very hard to reconcile things in your mind. For me, it happens in the body.
Where do you feel it in your body?
I think like it seems really mundane, but like people really underestimate breathing.
Right.
It's like I've found that I can have like days of just being in like a non-optimized mental state, feeling chaotic, like things are spiraling, and then realize like, when was the last time I took a deep breath? Like literally, and then like a deep breath, you're like, oh shit, like it's kind of all good. You know what I mean? It's just literally it doesn't like, these ideas of, and again, I'm absolutely no mindfulness guru by any means, so I'm just speculating and can speak to my own experience, but like, I don't know if we have these, as humans, I feel like in society, we have these ideas of like, you need to read a 400-page book that like belabors a point to really understand something, or like, and of course, I'm not discounting like, rigorous learning or anything like that, but I think like the principles of life are really not necessarily that complicated always. And I think finding those simple truths is like, is one, like the belief that they might be simple truths can be really comforting and validating. It might not take years of study to get to a point where you have some level of like, control over your mind and body. And again, this is speaking from a place of my own experience and privilege in a ton of ways, right? But yeah, that and really like, just moving your body and finding the places in your body that are often kind of like connected to whatever's happening in your mind.
Nice. So let's talk about some of the pieces of advice you want to leave for future generations to come.
Wow, another big one. We going in here?
Yeah, we could go in here.
Advice for future generations to come.
Or even advice for your son.
Yeah, and I think like, when you think about future generations to come, it's a pretty, it's a scary time in the world.
Right.
And, I think we're all kind of scared, for future generations, right? And what that means. And I think about me with, my son, like, how do you explain these things to him?
Right.
And I think, like, the problems seem insurmountable. But I think if you, like, find, your own sense of spirituality, you at least I start to realize that the small things, even though they don't matter to the world, they do matter.
Right.
For yourself and who you choose to be and who you are in the world and how that makes you feel. And that, like, we're, what I think about telling my son, and he has sort of a celestial name, is that, like, yes, 100% we have this duty to earth, and that duty to earth and that responsibility should, like, lead a lot of our decisions and our values and our practices, but we're also sort of children of something greater than the earth. And so, like, yes, respect the earth. Yes, we should, like, do everything we can to be, good participants of this equation, but find comfort in knowing that, like, you exist beyond this framework, you know what I mean? And so, and it's interesting, I think understanding those two things together, it's like this theory of correspondence. It's like kind of all the same. It's kind of all the same thing. You know what I mean? I don't know if you've ever read Hermetic philosophy. It's pretty fascinating. Train of thought that speaks to this idea of correspondence. And anyway, it's a whole other conversation. But
yeah, I think we're all just slowly remembering what we've forgotten.
Interesting.
And
yeah, I'll flip that back on you. I mean, how would you contextualize what your spirit is doing on this planet? You must have thought about it if you asked me the question, right?
Yeah, I mean, my spirit's doing a few things here. One is definitely preserving, like, I find myself connected to just very creative humans and humans with a unique perspective on Earth. And sometimes it's hard for them to share some of these perspectives, and I kind of love being curious enough to film their thoughts. Sometimes their thoughts just exist in their heads, and this kind of episode series is kind of a way to preserve that. And even through my photography, I enjoy preserving beauty and things that exist, but we usually don't preserve. But now, I'm optimistic about the times to come, because everyone has access to ways of preserving beauty and what they think is beautiful. And I guess everything could be beautiful if we add the right story to it.
Totally.
But yeah, that's kind of my soul is doing a few things here. But yeah, I have one more deep question. I'm gonna pull it out of this book that I
love, by the way, that you're kind of framing social media in a more altruistic lens. I think that's really refreshing to think about the value that documentation can create. Because there's always two sides of a coin, right? And to your point, the way that we're usually thinking about anything is not necessarily the truth. It's just
So, what key life experiences really shaped who you are?
What key life experience shaped who I am?
Yeah, was there a really tough time in life that you overcame and that could help future future beings exist with more ease. We all face different challenges, and I'm curious to hear about a challenge that you kind of went through, and that now you look back at.
I think there's two biggest periods like that were, one, when my father died, and then two, building public records, which came kind of like right after the other. The first, losing a parent like in too early, or any sort of like situation like that. I think the lesson to me is the realization that like you can be okay in things. And again, it kind of goes back to this mind-body sort of like dynamic. And I would kind of experience like during this period like this really deep sense of pain and despair and disbelief, and then watch myself kind of flip momentarily into a space of being okay, like moment to moment.
Whoa.
And it was kind of realization that like what's going on right now is like profoundly terrible, profoundly painful, profoundly in so many different ways. But like that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not okay. I'm spiraling into this pit of doom and despair, which is like I think a natural human fear of just like how bad can it get. And I think like more than anything, navigating that whole period of sadness like made me realize that we really do have more control over our mind-body state than we give ourselves credit for. And if we really kind of practice how to sort of navigate that in a really intentional way, it's a really powerful tool for life, you know what I mean? And if you believe that like life is really about learning, which I think is what I believe, it's like the more fucked up shit is, it's just more learning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's a really comforting way to navigate. And again, that comes from a place of we're in a very privileged place, and a lot of people in the world don't have, it's a whole different level of what badness is. So, but I think the lesson still is interesting and can be valuable. And then with public records, building it is like, I think this is a good lesson for entrepreneurs or people that want to build or create. It's like, it's hard, and like, I've had my own journeys since then and growing the organization and whatnot of like, why isn't this happening? Why isn't this opening up? Why isn't the flow, more fluid or whatever? And the truth is just hard, and like for me, I think, and what I tell people around me that are kind of on their own journey coming up or trying to build or create something, it's like, more than likely, like stop making it like it's a condition or circumstantially. You got to do better. You got to do something different, and you just got to just like rethink it and do better, because it's on us. Because most of the things that I've seen people create, without, obviously there's some situations of like luck or whatever, but it's just hard, and you got to really have a stomach to push through that and not like feel bad for yourself or feel like, you know what I mean? And so it's a scary thing, and it's even scary to me, like thinking about the, pushing towards the next plateau of my journey or whatnot. But it's just not, it's just never easy, and I think like it's important to demystify the fact that it's easy for anybody,
Right. So where's the future for you guys, and for you? Where do you see yourself in the future, and what are your plans with public records, and what are some of your personal visions for the future?
So we're hyper committed to growing the organization, and on a practical level, we're exploring kind of additional multifaceted, sort of ambitious projects in the built environment, both in New York and otherwise. Adjacent to that, we've established sort of a offshoot called public service, which is sort of like our creative practice, doing work with other people, sort of like to keep ourselves creatively engaged and active in between these larger scale public records like projects. And so on a practical level, like that's what we're doing as an organization, both in not just hospitality and music, but residential, and we're interested in the way people live and the way people work, and as much as like hospitality and entertainment. And And then more internally, we're very fortunate that in our growth as an organization, we started to really kind of surround ourselves with a team and talented and is kind of taking the batons in some way. And
Nice.
so I'm, sort of been stepping into sort of a different type of role, like kind of nurturing this sort of, human foundation as much as the physical foundation. And Francis, my partner, and I have been finding a lot of like interest and gratification, kind of working with these people that, are really committed to the vision and kind of putting their own mark on it. So it's kind of creating a whole new layer of dynamics within the organization, how we think about growth and the whys and like, coming to the realization that this thing that started in your head, it's going to kind of take on a life of its own. And how do you insert certain inputs to achieve certain outputs that are not necessarily so linear, it's just building something with your hand, you know what I mean?
Nice. Well, thanks for all these perspectives, bro.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Love that you just reached out.
Dude,
It's cool.
yeah. I'm stoked to have connected with you, and I've been following your work for a while, and I resonate deeply with all the energy that it radiates.
Thank you.
And I hope that all your projects keep radiating the same vibes.
Likewise.
I find that public records is like a cultural hub that is amplifying a beautiful message.
Thank you.
But yeah, thanks for being here. Can I give you a hug?
Yeah, of course.
Hell yeah, bro.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Pleasure.
bro. If you guys like that video, we'll probably speak to Shane in a year or so and see what changed. Yeah, peace and love.